Lecture 14, continuing with the question, do we possess free will? Please excuse the background noise. There's construction taking place outside Building 32, and it's even louder than usual. Such are the trials of teaching remotely. So last time we were talking about determinism and its connection with free will. Determinism is the view that the state of the universe at any past time, together with the laws of nature, fixes the state of the universe at any later time. So if you chose the cake, for example, then given the laws of nature and the state of the universe about 13 or so billion years ago, that was guaranteed to happen. There was no alternative outcome given the prior state of the universe billions of years before you were born, together with the laws of nature. And that can seem flatly incompatible with your choosing the cake freely. Your taking the cake was determined by factors outside your control, that is, the laws of nature and some prior state of the universe that obtained long before you were born, S1, so how could you have chosen freely? Well, I haven't put this as an explicit argument, rather as a rhetorical question. That's an exercise for you, and this will be a question on the next quiz. Now, this argument against free will does depart from a controversial premise about the nature of the universe, namely that the laws that govern it are deterministic. But things don't seem much better if the laws are indeterministic, as they are on some interpretations of quantum mechanics. So let indeterminism be the thesis that the state of the universe at any past time, together with the laws of nature, fixes the probability that the universe will be in various states later. If indeterminism is true, then L and S1 don't entail that the universe will be in state S2 later. Rather, they entail that the universe has a certain probability, say X, of being in S2 later. So given L and S1, the probability that the universe will later be in S2 is X, and so the probability that it will be in some other state, i.e. not S2, is 1 minus X, since the probabilities have to add up to 1. So that's indeterminism. Free will seems to be no more possible under indeterminism than under determinism. So suppose indeterminism is true, and just to put some numbers on the table, suppose that the laws of nature and some state of the universe S1 obtaining long before you were born entail that the probability that you will take the cake is 0.7. And suppose, in fact, you do take the cake. Your taking the cake was, in effect, the result of a coin flip undertaken by the universe, with the cake side having 0.7 probability and the not cake side having 0.3 probability. The cake side came up, but that was just the result of random chance. So there seems to be no more room for you to act freely if the universe is indeterministic than there is room for you to act freely if the universe is indeterministic. So perhaps we don't need a controversial physical premise about the universe to run this argument. All we need is either determinism is true or indeterminism is true. Either way, we don't have free will. Some philosophers think this is all a storm in a teacup, fuss over nothing. There is no conflict between our possessing free will, so being morally responsible for our actions, and our actions being the product of causes over which we have no control. These philosophers are called compatibilists because they think that free will and determinism are compatible, and one notable example is the British philosopher A.J. Ayer. Ayer was a student of Gilbert Ryle's at the University of Oxford. Ryle we've already met when we talked about self-knowledge and Sarah Paul's paper. It is not, Ayer says, in Freedom and Necessity, causality or determinism that freedom is to be contrasted with, but constraint. I shall try to show that from the fact that my action is causally determined, it does not necessarily follow that I am constrained to do it. And this is equivalent to saying that it does not necessarily follow that I am not free. So what's an example of a constraint, something that takes away one's freedom? Ayer gives the case of the kleptomaniac, someone who is compelled to go around pinching things. A kleptomaniac is not a free agent in respect of his stealing because he does not go through any process of deciding whether or not to steal. Or rather, if he does go through such a process, it is irrelevant to his behavior. Whatever he resolved to do, he would steal all the same. And it is this that distinguishes him from the ordinary thief. It's an interesting question what Ayer would say about the case of Aaron Hernandez, the Patriots player with brain damage who was convicted for murder. So on page 623, he is talking about causation and the sense in which causes necessitate. And he says, suppose, for example, that a psychoanalyst is able to account for some aspect of my behavior by referring it to some lesion, brain damage, perhaps, that I suffered in my childhood. And then he suggests that in this case, it's true that my behavior is capable of being explained in the sense that it can be subsumed under some natural law, but it does not follow that I'm acting under some constraint. This is related to one of the notes and questions, number 2 in the notes and questions on page 625, which I think it would be good to think about. Ayer tries to give some sufficient conditions for someone to act freely. There are 3 of them, and if they all obtain, Ayer claims the person did act freely. To say that I could have acted otherwise is to say, 1, that I should have acted otherwise if I had so chosen, 2, that my action was voluntary in the sense in which the actions, say, of the kleptomaniac are not, question mark hanging over Aaron Hernandez, and 3, that nobody compelled me to choose as I did. And, Ayer claims, when 1, 2, and 3 are fulfilled, I may be said to have acted freely. And Ayer thinks, reasonably enough, that these conditions are sometimes fulfilled. So that's not the controversial part of his theory. The controversial part is that conditions 1, 2, and 3 are jointly sufficient for someone to act freely. That might seem to exhaust the options. Either Ayer is right, and the fact that our actions have causes which occurred way before we were born, so causes over which we have no control, is of no threat to our free will and moral responsibility, or philosophers like Galen Strawson are right, and free will is an illusion, a chimera, We think we have free will. We feel we have free will. We feel we could go this way or that way freely. It's entirely up to us, and we're responsible if things turn out badly if we go this way rather than that way. But that's all a gigantic mistake. But in fact, there's a third option, and that's represented in the readings by the piece by Chisholm. Chisholm in Human Freedom and the Self starts by agreeing with Strawson. For if what we say you did was really something that was brought about by your own beliefs and desires, if these beliefs and desires in the particular situation in which you happened to have found yourself caused you to do just what it was that we say you did do, then, since they caused it, you were unable to do anything other than just what it was that you did do. Chisholm then considers a standard objection. See Ayer a few slides back. And that objection is that you could have done otherwise means no more nor less than if you had chosen to do otherwise, then you would have done otherwise. And if that's right, then as far as buying the cake goes, you could have done otherwise. You could have refrained from buying the cake. Because if you had chosen not to buy the cake, then presumably you wouldn't have bought it. Question for you: what is Chisholm's reply to this objection? Chisholm's own view turns on a distinction between kinds of causes. So what kinds of things can be causes? Well, clearly events or happenings or occurrences, things that have a beginning, a middle, and an end in time, like explosions or lectures, can be causes. The explosion caused the fire. The lecture caused a commotion. But also, it appears that agents, in particular human beings, can be causes. Kelly caused the fire. Thomas caused the commotion. So we have at least two kinds of causation. And Chisholm gives these somewhat unhelpful medieval labels to them. I shall say, Chisholm writes, that when one event or set of events causes some other event, then we have an instance of transient causation. And I shall say that when an agent, as distinguished from an event, causes an event, then we have an instance of imminent causation. Whatever Kelly is, she's not an event like an explosion. Kelly herself can cause events like explosions, things that happen, but Kelly herself is not a thing that happens. You can ask when the explosion or wedding or lecture occurred, but it doesn't make any sense to ask when Kelly occurred. A somewhat better and indeed more common label for imminent causation is agent causation. You can look that up in the glossary. And it's important to realize that agent causation, on Chisholm's view, is not simply a kind of event or transient causation. Here I think you'll find the agent causation entry in the glossary helpful. Here is Chisholm's view of agent causation. We may say that your hand was moved by you, but we may also say that the motion of your hand was caused by the motion of certain muscles. And we may say that the motion of the muscles was caused by certain events that took place within the brain. But some event, and presumably one of those that took place within the brain, was caused by the agent, you, and not by any other events. So in order for you to cause your hand to move, on Chisholm's view, there has to be this neural event in your brain that was caused by you and not by any prior neuron firings or any other events. So, in order for us to act freely on Chisholm's view, some, one would have thought, spooky things have to happen in the brain. If we have free will, and if Chisholm is right, then there will be some neural events occurring in our brains whenever we act freely that have no physical causes. That's the price you have to pay to accept a view like Chisholm's. On Chisholm's view, because we have free will, the universe is neither deterministic nor indeterministic. Here is some useful terminology to close. Consider the question, is free will incompatible with determinism? If you answer no, you're a compatibilist. If you answer yes, you're an incompatibilist. Ea is a compatibilist. Now, if you answered yes to the incompatibility question, there's another question. Do we in fact have free will? And if you answer yes, then you're a libertarian, and Chisholm is an example. If you answer no, then you are a hard determinist. Strawson doesn't put his argument against free will in terms of determinism. He's not exactly a hard determinist, but if he belongs anywhere on that diagram, it's in the vicinity of the blue rectangle. Where do you place yourself on that diagram? It's quite disturbing to realize that such an important question, do we have free will? Are we ever morally responsible for our actions? Do we ever truly deserve praise and blame for the things that we do? Remains the subject of great controversy and is unresolved. I hope that won't stop you from coming to an opinion on this issue. Next week, a change of pace, political philosophy. I'll see you then.